In this video, we're going to discuss a means of using cell validation for data entry. You can restrict, limit, or just provide input as to what you put in for your values. So when we look at data validation, it's located under the Data tab under Data Tools. And it's this little icon right here called Data Validation. And we can select data validation. This will allow us to work with a variety of inputs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my cursor at B5. We're going to limit how people can enter a date. So that cell right there, nothing has any validation set yet. So I'll go up here to data validation and then data validation again. And when we work with data validation, there are three tabs that we work with. The settings, this is where you can create and set up restrictions. We'll talk about that in a moment. There's also an input message. So when you are on a particular cell, you'll see a little pop-up here that will show, you can tell someone who's using your worksheet what they need to do. Not required to have this, but notice you can turn it on and off as needed. And then finally, error alert. So when you are entering something and you want someone to not be able to go and violate the validation, you can set an error alert. There are three styles. There's stop, warning, and information. Stop basically means you have to enter what was specified, and then from there, you can then either retry it or you could cancel it. A warning gives you away, hey, you really need to enter it like this, but you could go beyond it. And so you could enter a value outside of the parameters. And information is just simply that. There is some restrictions, but you can do what you basically want. If you have created some validations, you no longer want them, you can clear it all and it'll clear all three tabs. You're not required to have an input message or an error alert. Those are just settings for you. The stop is always the error, the most restrictive. You can change that as needed. So in the settings, we are going to provide our restriction. So right now, by default, the validation is any value. You can put anything in you want. So we're going to limit that. So I'm going to hit the down arrow, and you can see we have whole numbers, decimals, a list, a date, a time. You can also specify a text length. This would be good if you had a little note that you wanted to include, and you can work with custom. So we're going to do date. And once you choose what to allow, then other options will show up. So the data will be between. Well, I don't want it to have it between. I want it to be less than or equal to a date. I want it either be today or before. So I'll do less than or equal to, and then I have to enter that. So I don't know what date they're going to be using, so we could use the functions. You could just simply type in equal today, open, close, parenthesis. So the input message, all we can do is, you don't have to have a title. In the input message, enter a date on or before today. And then the error alert, we're gonna make it the most restrictive. We'll mean stop. So the error message will be the date must be on or before today. So there will be no way of getting around that. So we have the three options, and then I'll just click OK. And now you will see that little, here, I'm going to click off of it. So let's say we type in someone's name. Let's do Mickey Mouse. He's going to run a car. So once I hit enter, because I want to go the line below it, you'll see that this is that input message. So if I enter today's date, which is the 22nd, I can hit enter and it works. But let's say this was actually the 10th, so we could do May 10. You can always go back if you need to. But let's date it forward. So let's do 5/30. And you're going to see the error message. Now your colors may be different than mine. So really the only two options you have here is retry or cancel. Meaning, oh, I don't know what the date was, I'll just hit cancel. If you hit retry, it'll clear it, and you can just type in the current date. So let's say April 24th. Okay. So the next one is type of car. Now this is a validation, but we're going to be doing what's called a list. And they have the ability to rent these, basically these cars. And we have a little lookup that's going to do in the blue area that's going to actually calculate what they owe. And when you have these kinds of values here, since we are using a lookup value, if there's a misspelling, then it may not work. And since you have so many values here, we're going to create what's called a list. So I'm going to be in B5. It's going to be a little drop-down list. I'm going to be in B5. We're going to go to Data Tools. We're going to do Data Validation, and then Data Validation again. And it always leaves you on the last tab you chose. So we'll go over to Settings. And right now it's any value. So we'll click this little down arrow, and we'll choose List. Now in this instance, we have the source. You could just type these in, separating by commas. But it's actually a little easier if you just highlight where they reside, whether it's on the same page or on a different worksheet. So it's going to generate that list using this, this range. Input message, here we can just say choose a type of vehicle from the list. And under title, I can actually type, I can do, we can just type in type. Oops, let's spell this right. They're not required. The error alert, if we do stop, then they can only choose from that. So I'm going to choose information, and we're just going to leave this blank. So we'll click OK, and you'll see the little input message, and you'll see the little down arrow. So I can go here and I can choose a particular vehicle. You'll notice that when I chose sports, it typed it in and it provided the charge per day. So let's see, we have it right here. So charge per day is $75 and per mile is 50 cents. So the number of days, we can actually restrict what range they can use. So we can go over here again to data validation. And in this instance, go back to settings. We're going to do, let's say decimal. No, let's do whole number. And we're going to say between, let's say 0 and this is for days, so we'll do 30. And then the input message, enter number of days between 1 and 30. So actually I should go back over here to settings and change this to 1. So what this will do is if someone enters something negative, it won't accept it. Now I could have this -10 if you needed to be, but we don't want that. The error message, we're just going to do a stop, and then days entered must be between 1 and 30. And we'll click OK. And so now we can enter the number of days. Let's say it's 25. And you can see that it's starting to do the calculations. Oh, I don't need that to be yellow. Let's make that black. So I could do 0 and I get that error. Notice I can only retry it. So if I do 10, now let's say I want to edit my validation. Then all I need to do is go back to data validation, and then I can make the change. Let's say here, I will give it a warning. So they'll see it, they'll have the ability to cancel, retry, or just go on. So we'll just hit OK, and let's enter 40 days. So here we can say days entered must be between 1 and 30. Do we want to continue? So we'll just hit yes. And that means that we can kind of override it. So it really depends as to how restrictive you want to be and whether or not you want it to be something that you can override. Number of miles, we can do the same thing. We'll do data validation. Here, settings, we're going to say a whole number, and let's just say has to be less than or equal to 500. And here I'm not going to do an input. I'll do an error. I'm just going to do information. We'll click OK. So really enter anything you want. So if I do 400, you say, boy, $3,200 to rent this vehicle. Let's do 600 miles. And this value doesn't match the data validation for this. Okay. But that just means it's going to override it. We can go back up here to sports, and I could choose a different car. Let's say compact. You can see it drastically reduces the cost. So that's basically working with simple data validation when working with data entry. How much you provide is really up to you as to what your needs are. So that is data validation.